Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I know your journey, which has just been described, has been a very busy one. Since then, of course, you are currently, and also very pertinent to our discussion today, counsel to Torridon Law, partly related strategic advisory business there. You're a partner in a private equity firm. You sit on the board of a London-based copper miner. And in your spare time, when you're not looking after your new grandchild.
Yes.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much, yes.
You also teach diplomacy at Columbia University. So what I'm hoping is that we've got Mike Pompeo unplugged.
You got it. Let's
today.
rock. You got it. Let's go. I agree.
Good. But obviously we're heavily leaning into your experience in those two critical positions that you had in the first Trump administration. Let's start with a bird's eye view, if we can. How do you view what is this geopolitical reset, this fundamental realignment of global power dynamics at this point? And very specifically, what is America's role in this changing world?
Goodness. Well, first of all, Becky, great to be with you. And thank you all for having me here. I don't know that America's role has changed. I hope it's not. The world depends on a America that's prepared to lead at enormous cost to the United States, but with magnificent benefits to our country as well that I think far exceed the costs. And so I hear these stories about America in decline and America walking off the stage, and I think they have adopted Xi Jinping's talking points. And so what has changed, I think, is you do have a very powerful force in Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party with a big military, a big economy that has lots of challenges, but big nonetheless, with global intentions for its own hegemony. And that has changed the dynamic. In the same way that President Reagan was confronted by a Soviet Union that wanted the world to look very different today, we all are confronted by a Chinese Communist Party that wants the world to look very, very differently.
So it is no surprise, it will not be any surprise to this audience, if I were to ask you whether you believe that China is the biggest risk to global stability, correct?
It's not a close call. Not only the biggest risk, singular risk.
So let me just, I just want a show of hands from the audience. Who in this audience agrees with the Secretary that China is the biggest risk to global stability? Raise your hands. Who believes that the US is a big or the biggest risk to global stability today in 2025? That is an interesting position.
Everyone's entitled to their own option, their own choice. I would ask this: how many of you are putting most of your wealth into the renminbi?
You're good at this.
No,
I
just never. No one's ever done that with an audience before. That's the first time. I just popped into my head. I mean, let's be serious and thoughtful, because you are economic actors. And by the way, you care about your families and human rights as well. But you're mostly just greedy capitalists. So am I. And that's a good thing. And if you're looking for who's undermining basic property rights, the capacity to contract, right? Challenging fundamental understandings about the post-World War II order. It's not America. And so today, if you're a sovereign and you are conducting global business, you store your wealth in the dollar, the euro, or gold. No one's going, geez, I wonder if I can get my hand on a bunch of rubles, right? And so we should, it's interesting that people said we present the most risk. I think your economic actions belie that you put your hand up, but here we go.
In a complicated, unpredictable, angst-inducing world, and I feel that, where we stand in 2025 can be all of the above, do you believe that the US is better or worse off with a president who is unpredictable at best, unreliable and chaotic in many people's minds at worst?
Yeah, I mean, that's just not the President Trump that I knew.
What? The unpredictable?
Oh, no, very unpredictable, yes. And what was an enormous benefit to me as Secretary of State to have an unpredictable boss. I mean, it truly was, right? When you think about the contrast between someone like, and I don't mean this politically, it would have been true for President Bush Jr. and certainly Sr., and it would have been true for Joe Biden. Like the whole world knew them, right? They'd been on the stage for decades, in the case of President Biden, and people could predict what they would do. With President Trump, it was very powerful to have that uncertainty window around him. It created different risks, but very powerful leverage to say, you know, we might just do something that's not inside of the normal foreign policy bounds. We might just take a strike on Qasem Soleimani. We might. It turns out we did. By the way, I'm not unbiased. The Iranians are still trying to kill me. They have $1 million bounty on my head. By the way, my wife thinks that's a little low. But I mean, so that, by the way, we restored deterrence from Iran by taking a strike that most of the U.S. foreign policy establishment and the entirety of the European foreign policy establishment believed would cause World War III. Multiple presidents had declined to take that strike. We were losing deterrence, and we did it. Then there's an exemplar. I could go through 24 if we had time.
No, I mean, that's in the era that you were Secretary of State, and we really want to lean into that. I do want to look at the world in 2025 and drill down on the US
But it's
role.
not terribly different than midnight.
This is my point. How different is it today?
It's not that different than Midnight Hammer, right? The operation that the United States conducted over Esfahan and Natanz and Fordow, and not that terribly different. I don't know that any, and I don't do politics when it comes to security stuff. I don't know that any of the previous presidents would have conducted Midnight Hammer. Previous presidents had refused to support Israeli strikes at Osirak, right? You know the history. President Trump said, no, this matters to America. It's good for our allies in the region, not just Israel. Good for the Gulf Arab states as well. We're going to go take it down.
I want to drill down a little bit on the Middle East, if that's okay. I don't want to spend the whole time talking about the Middle East because there's a huge world out there.
It's a complicated
and I really
place.
want to get your sense across the sort of geopolitics, geoeconomic, geotech files, if I can, which all sort of collide as one in 2025. But I was in Sharm el-Sheikh 10 days ago, witnessing the Arab and majority Muslim nations alongside the European allies united with President Trump to end the conflict in Gaza and to chart a new era for peace and prosperity in the Middle East. And that was a huge achievement. There is no question about that. But you could argue it was the easy part. The tough part is what happens next, who will govern Gaza, whether the process results in a Palestinian state or at least a credible pathway towards one. Given that ending this conflict in Gaza is the through line to potential peace in the Middle East, what do you make of the Trump plan and the fact that the deal was pushed through before many of the details were finalized?
Yeah. No, by the way, I think, Becky, it's fair to say it was the easy part. I think it's equally fair to say it wasn't easy. That is, the easiest parts with respect to this are still incredibly difficult. So to your point, I think remarkable accomplishment of diplomacy from Mr. Witkoff, Mr. Kushner, Mr. Trump, and Mr. Rubio all. And by the way, Gulf Arab states who were part of it as well, the Turks, the Qataris, everybody who came together to deliver at least that first step along the way towards a more peaceful region was a good outcome. Now the hard part, the complexity hasn't changed. Hamas is working, as we sit here, Hamas is working to rebuild. They're doing it by hook and crook. They're getting whatever they can from the Iranians and external support. They're not going to go quietly. They're a resistance movement. What do resistance movements do? They resist. And so there's still a lot more work to create a governance model there that will deliver good outcomes for the people of Gaza, security for Israel, and you have to be careful, a more peaceful, more prosperous region.
Right.
There's still lots of risks sitting in the region, for sure.
I know that you share Donald Trump's view that the extension of the Abraham Accords around the region, it could be extremely important, nay, key to a future peace and prosperity in this region. Correct? I mean,
I do share
a
that
big
view.
Proponent on that.
Yes.
And the big prize would be normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia. Correct?
Yes, and if you'd allow me to include the largest Muslim populations in the world, not just the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, absolutely central, I concur, but we shouldn't forget Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan. These are big Islamic nations. Also should be part of this central understanding.
So let's be clear, the kingdom will not begin conceiving of normalizing relations until a credible pathway to the establishment of a Palestinian state is established. Donald Trump's position has evolved on the issue of a Palestinian state over his sort of political career and presidency, and you were there. He's been skeptical of a fully independent Palestinian state as a solution to this conflict. What do you understand, and I know you're not in administration now, but what do you understand to be his position at the moment? Because, and do you believe he needs to be categoric about this? I mean, this region is categoric about this, a Palestinian horizon. So does Donald Trump need to be categoric?
I don't want to answer for him. I'm not the administration. I get the conversation around the two-state solution, but I want to reframe it for you. What's the chance that there's going to be a Gazan Marine Corps? And so I ask that because as we think about what it means to be a state, there's certain indicia of what nationhood really includes. And there's pieces of indicia of statehood that is incredibly unlikely in our lifetimes, and that's not true. Xi Jinping says we're all going to live to 150. So maybe, but right, there's not going to be an air force. Right? Gaza's not going to have fly typhoons.
I guess my question
right?
was,
but this
believe
matters.
There should be effort towards a credible pathway, at least, if not a Palestinian state?
Of course.
You want to see that.
There should absolutely be a pathway, but the pathway is
going to accept that.
Yes, and the answer is but the pathway needs to turn, first of all, on the capacity of a governing force to deliver a non-extremist government inside of Gaza and inside of Judea and Samaria. Period, full stop. If those can't be delivered, if it continues to be governed by folks like Abu Mazen, who is a terrorist, right? Yeah, no, I mean, it's not me saying it. Do you disagree? No, I mean, you said you heard me saying that somehow as if that's not a factual statement.
I was thinking about Judea and Samaria, actually. In this region, normally called the occupied West Bank.
Just so you know, just so you know, Abu Mazen continues to pay people to kill human beings that are residing in Israel. And I'm using that language very carefully. It's not just Jews, right? His pay for slay still exists. That's terrorism, right? You seem to have this sort of view that somehow I'm saying something that's a political statement or a pro-Israeli statement. This is just a human statement about the conditions that Abu Mazen has terrorized his own people and the nation of Israel. And so until you take that down, until you take that extremism down...
There are extremists on both sides, by the way, at the moment, aren't there? I think we must accept that.
Fair enough, but it is not the case that the Israelis are... I mean, it's just, there's not a parallel here. There's no mirror image. If you think that, you'll disagree with me if you think there's a mirror image. There's no mirror images between the Israelis and what the terrorists are doing. And by the way, everyone knows that in this region as well. Whether they say it as boldly as I do.
And I'm not playing what about it to me here at all.
It's a different battle. But so this is really important because this gets to the crux of it. When you say, should there be a pathway to a state, the answer is yes. And the pathway begins with the fundamental conception of governance models that not only don't present risk to Syria, to Lebanon, to Jordan, but to the people that live in those places as well, right? Today, if you're a civilian trying to just raise your family in Gaza, you're worried that some Hamas knucklehead's going to come shoot your ass in the street. No, I mean, not to be too blunt, you ask to be unplugged. That's the reality of life for these folks today. And somehow the narrative on your network and else places, right, presents a fundamentally different case to that. And I think that really doesn't do justice for the people of Gaza.
I guess, and I was just thinking back to just having heard Anwar Gargash, who's the diplomatic advisor to the UAE president today, saying we must no longer continue with these maximalist positions when it comes to the Palestinian state. Israeli security absolutely first and foremost, and a Palestinian state absolutely first and foremost.
You go.
So
100% agreement.
You fundamentally agree.
Yeah, fundamentally.
So getting back to my
by the way,
question,
he's a great
Donald
diplomat.
Trump
yes,
categorically state that a Palestinian state is
yeah.
what we should be looking at going
I'll leave that to him. I do believe that. Yeah.
I'm done.
There you go. There you go.
Listen, energized by his success in the Middle East, the president does seem eager to harness that sort of elusive ingredient in politics and diplomacy that you all know well, which is momentum, right?
Yes.
This week began with this 24 hours in the Middle East for Donald Trump. It ended with the Ukrainian president trying to convince Donald Trump, unsuccessfully, of course, to approve new long-range missiles. Then we learned that there may or may not be a meeting between President Trump and Putin in Budapest. That now seems unlikely. I just want to discuss with you the president's handling of the Ukraine-Russia file, because I know that you've been quite reflective about your time in office, and you've said you wish that more had been done to support Ukraine. So at this point now, were you advising the president, should he, to your mind, provide Ukraine with what it needs, including offensive weapons? And importantly, should he increase pressure on Russia, particularly on its oil sector, by finally imposing those sanctions that he's toyed with, he's talked about, but done nothing about? He could do both of those things tomorrow. Were you to advise him to do so if you were still Secretary of State?
Yes. This is actually easy. Yes and yes. Like, I've been critical of the Biden administration for the same failure. The constant refrain of these are the things that we won't do, right? Talking about that incessantly has created too much space for Vladimir Putin. And I get the risk of escalation. When you're the Secretary of State, you are constantly concerned about escalation. I don't mean to minimize that at all. But boy, we have demonstrated our capacity to do hard things and contain escalation. And I wish that we collectively, not just the United States, but Europe and the United States, had done more in, I'd go all the way back to the fall of 21, when we knew this was being contemplated, up and through the entire Biden presidency, where they refused to provide Ukraine with the systems that they needed to do strikes against targets that are across the line. And I hope President Trump will both permit Ukraine to take these strikes and provide the capacity, importantly intelligence, so that they can do that. Because elsewise we're going to end up right where we are today, and this is really bad for all of us.
And impose those sanctions? I mean, we know that, capital power, and this is a strategic weapon at this point, isn't it?
Yes, and let's be clear about what the sanctions really mean. To actually make the energy sanctions important, you have to go after Chinese banks, who are underwriting a good chunk of this war by getting discounted gas and oil from Russia, providing an enormous lifeline. So we often in the press, they'll talk about India. In the end, you have to go after the Chinese financial institutions that are keeping the economy of Russia afloat to the extent it is.
I want to come back to your position.
And by the way, that's hard to do. I get it. It's easy to be out and talk about it. It's hard to do, but entirely within our ken. And even the threat of that, a credible threat of that, I think can begin to change the dynamic.
I really want to drill down on your position on China. And I heard you speak at some point suggesting that many people in Washington say, why can't we just sort out our relationship with China? And you've got a really important sort of perspective on that. Before I do that, I know Donald Trump has said he'll slap sanctions on the Russian oil industry or on Moscow if the Europeans will stop depending on Russian oil. Just in the last hour or so, in a joint statement, I think this is unprecedented, the US and Qatar have just warned the Europeans that environmental regulations that they have in place at present, they're sort of greening regulations.
This is in Europe.
This is in Europe. Risk the LNG supplies from both Qatar and the US at a time when Europe needs to wean itself off Russian supplies. This is a kind of carrot and stick with the Europeans, isn't it, at the moment? I'm just fascinated to see what your response to that is. This is a joint statement from the US and Qatar.
I hadn't seen that statement, but it's true. I mean, the Europeans, God bless you all, right? The theory of the case was Russian gas, sunshine, and windmills. That is a bad energy policy for your security. Sunshine and windmills aren't going to cut it, and the Russians aren't reliable. And I think that statement that you just read, to the extent I understood it correctly in context, I think that reflects that. So I know what President Trump is trying to do, saying to Europe, no, you all have to get serious about this. I think that's a pretty reasonable ask of Europe. I'm confident that this region can provide adequate supply of energy to the Europeans. That is, there are substitutes. We're not asking them to destroy their economies. And we're now 3 years in. We ought to have been about it for 36 months. And as with all things, we had many failures in the Trump administration. Trump won. As with all things, there's no time like the present to fix it.
We talked about momentum being the sort of, this elusive ingredient in diplomacy and politics. And the leverage that Donald Trump has successfully employed on Israel to stop the war at present. I wonder whether you think that exists with Russia and China, which is his sort of, next file, as it were. These are both nuclear powers. They're not dependent on the United States for military or financial support. So this kind of strong-armed, transactional statecraft, but not as we know it, as it were, which we are seeing from Donald Trump, ain't necessarily going to be successful with two very, very significant adversaries at this point.
Yeah, no, the situations are very different. Their economies are different. The leverage points are different. But the United States has enormous capacity to shape these things, just as you described, right? In this case, and you were talking about Russia, we have an enormous amount of capacity to shape the leverage at the negotiating table on behalf of the West. That's how I think about this conflict. I don't think about this as a Russia-Ukraine fight. I think this is a fight about Western civilization. And so we have an enormous capacity to shape that if we're prepared to use those tools.
I don't expect you to call out the president on his somewhat chaotic but strong-armed transactional statecraft. But what are the risks?
Yeah. By the way, just for the record, your starting point was January of this year. The war in Ukraine didn't begin in January of this year. So you're a bit mockingly talked about this is not traditional statecraft. Well, traditional statecraft gave Vladimir Putin a green light to invade Europe. If you consider Biden traditional statecraft.
I wasn't mockingly using the word. I mean, this is statecraft, but not as we know it. I mean, it's a fact. It is a fact.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is in the deep tradition. As I read civilizational history, I think this is exactly how diplomacy's been conducted for an awfully long time. Power, hard power, sitting behind your diplomatic efforts is the model that, I don't know, Mesopotamia. I can go back a long way. We're not far from there. I can go back an awfully long ways if you want to have that conversation. But be that as it may, we ought to remind ourselves that Ukraine was invaded under Obama and Biden and not under Donald Trump in his first 4 years.
2014.
And people will say to me, Mike, you were just lucky. Could be. They could say that the Lord was with you. It could be. I will take both of those. But the reality is that because of the nature of President Trump, he chose not to for a moment. And so President Trump needs to get back to that same model, and I hope that he will, where we begin to exert that leverage and convince Putin to go back in the box. It is really important, and we're going to talk about China, I know. Xi Jinping is absolutely watching how the West behaves as against Vladimir Putin when he takes land through force. And if we get this one wrong, there's a lot more risk in the Pacific as well.
So how does the US get this one right, to your mind? You've been very vocal about the battle to secure global supply chains of critical minerals. You've described the world as entering a new geopolitical epoch not seen since the Second World War. You want the US to move faster on critical minerals. So how and where, first question, and should Donald Trump at this point slap 100% tariffs on China November 1? Two questions to you.
I'm sorry, what's the first one?
The first one is the effort to speed up the supply of critical minerals.
Okay, yes, ma'am. I got it. By the way, they were talking about European regulation. The thing that stands between the United States and the capacity to have a lot of elements of its own supply chain, and by the way, that'd be true broadly for West. It's not just about having things in the US. I'm happy to have it in South Korea. I'm happy to have it in Australia. Is that we're our own regulatory nightmare. It's very difficult to create a power plant or a natural gas refinery or oil refinery in the United States. These are hard things to do, and we ought to go fix that. So that's about the speed. So it's not just about minerals with rare earths, it's about processing them. It's a little more complex than that, but suffice it to say, it's hard. And President Trump, I think, is trying to, but 50 states, their own state regulations, it's our model. I love our model, but man, it makes some of these things too slow. So we should move out foursquare to decrease critical things in our dependency on the Chinese Communist Party for the Western way of life. And your second question was?
Should Donald Trump slap 100% tariffs on China on November the 1st?
No. I say that. I don't think it achieves his aim. And so I think he should, and by the way, I think we'll probably get to a better place. But if the stated objective is to convince Xi Jinping to alter his behavior with respect to a certain element of what he's trying to do, I don't think that will actually accomplish it. And so if I were counseling him, I would say, let's make sure we stay focused on the thing that's in front of us. And I don't know that the 100% tariffs on November 1st gives anybody a chance. I don't think it gives Secretary Bessent a chance to actually deliver that outcome.
You aren't a great fan of tariffs in and of themselves, are you?
No, broadly. No. As a broad model, no, I'm not. I think it slows American growth and retards our innovation, and that's a bad thing.
And JP Morgan's CEO has said recently that there are huge risks for the US markets, and he's talking very specifically, or certainly has been, about the sort of instability and angst that has been brought on by this sort of, pivoting around trade wars and tariffs. Are you worried that Donald Trump's tariff and trade policies are a risk to US assets?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I mean, of course. I don't think that a global trading system based on tariffs is a model that benefits those of us in the West that want free trade. I will say, we put tariffs on in the first Trump administration as well. Your tool set isn't very big. When Europeans say, no, you can't sell Kansas wheat, just as an example, into Europe because it's not safe. Like, that's insane, right? We know what that is. That's a non-tariff barrier for entry of American markets. And so when you're trying to right that, when you're trying to fix that imbalance, your tool set's pretty limited. So I see why President Trump chooses tariffs to do that. It makes perfect sense to me. When the Chinese Communist Party is dumping steel on the world, causing American steel manufacturing to be decimated, there aren't that many tools. And so I know how the default back to tariffs to deliver so long as the objective to deliver the outcome is good. As long as the objective is to get the other side to just literally trade more freely.
But that's not the objective, is it? Frankly, under this administration.
No, President Trump has said, I'll bet he's done this on Truth Social as well. He has said, you go to zero, we'll go to zero. I know he said it to the Europeans, he said it to the Indians, happy to compete. I think that's definitely true. But we all know, right? We know these nations don't do that. They're protecting their own markets. I get that, believe me, as someone who stood for election 4 times, I get the domestic politics impact policy. He's definitely trying to convince these other nations to stop treating the United States in a way that he views as unfair.
He is also using tariffs as a political tool as well.
Yeah, but
we are seeing that.
That's true.
Colombia, India,
Yeah.
outside of the sort of, you go to zero, I'll go to zero.
I agree. And by the way, the difference, and I think this is observationally true, the difference between a sanction and a tariff as an economic matter, there's not that much difference, right? It's using economic leverage to achieve a political endpoint. Fair enough. If you put sanctions on Colombia, you'd say, well, that's the same thing. We often use sanctions for geopolitical objectives.
Can we talk about Latin America, South America,
sure.
while we're at it? Because as you were the director of the CIA under the first Trump administration, you should be sort of, well versed in what is going on. When the US president has accepted or has authorized CIA activity in and around Venezuela. What does that mean? What is he authorized at this point? What do you understand that to be? Are we looking, or should we be looking at regime change? Is this the toppling of Maduro that we're looking at here? What do you understand that authorization to mean, Mike? Given your experience?
I can't answer that. It's a great thing about
being
CIA director. No, I think I know the answer.
Okay.
And this is why I can't answer. This is why I can't answer it.
Give us a little bit.
So the public statement by President Trump was his authorized covert action. I don't know exactly what the language was in and around Venezuela.
Right.
That's
a
it's a statute.
It's a highly unusual admission, isn't it?
Medium unusual. It's been done before. We've announced covert programs before. Some of them smaller, some of them bigger. By the way, I wouldn't do it. As a former CIA director, I think we should keep the things we've authorized covert action and we should keep them quiet.
How about this is a yes or no answer? Is this about regime change?
I don't know. That I don't know the answer to.
Can you
make it up?
Can you? No. I don't expect you to make it up. For sure.
I don't make things up.
I wanted to just press you a little bit on what you see as the policy around Venezuela, Colombia at present. I mean, there is a school of thought that says this is sort of, offshoring the immigration policy that we see, the very aggressive immigration policy that we see onshore, as it were, in the States at the moment. The Trump administration is talking about this being very specifically going after narco traffickers. What do you make of it?
So I do think this is about President Trump has, for a very long time, long since he entered office, viewed illegal immigration and the crime and cartel activity that comes alongside of it as a problem for the United States of America. And so I do think a piece of what he is doing down there is aimed squarely at those very serious threats. And I share his view of those risks. I've talked about this a couple of times. Our challenge today along our southern border is very real. As a former CIA director, we often talked about ungoverned states or elements of regions that are ungoverned. That is where the central government doesn't control security, commerce, all the central things that nation states do. For the United States, and that's where terrorism often breeds. For the United States, that's often been 6,000 miles away. Today, we have ungoverned space on our southern border. The Mexican government doesn't control its own territory. The cartels are running the judicial systems, the economic models. We got to fix that. That is dangerous.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the action that the Trump administration is taking is very specifically not against the Mexicans at present. It's against, Venezuelans and the Colombians.
Oh no, that's not true. The action, what he's done on the southern border.
No, that I understand. I'm talking about the most recent action against narco-terrorists.
No, by the way, I think there's a very consistent set of policies against the risk of these cartels. By the way, the difference between a cartel and a jihadi organization, I couldn't tell you what it is. None of you can actually tell me what it is either.
Venezuela is accusing the CIA of having operated for years inside of Caracas.
You think I'm going to answer? Come on.
I've got to ask. As a former CIA director,
knock yourself out.
Mr. Secretary, is this true?
Yeah. I can neither confirm nor deny.
You'd expect me to ask it.
I fully expect you to answer, and you fully expect me not to anscer.
We've got about 10 minutes left. I do want to get a sort of, a real sense from you, in your private, through your sort of private sector lens, given, the incredible experience that we've sort of leaned into on your State Department and CIA lens. Not that you've given me anything on that, but through the private sector lens, we started this by talking about this kind of, the real change in the sort of global power dynamics. And I think just from your perspective in private equity, in sort of, strategic sort of, relations in the work that you've got with the mining company, where do you see the investment landscape at present? And where do you see the opportunities and where do you see the risk? We haven't even talked about AI and advanced tech, for example.
No,
what are your thoughts?
That's an important question. And I'll never forget, I'd been the CIA director for about a month, and President Trump, I was briefing him one day, and President Trump kicked everybody out, and he turns to me and he says, Mike, you always talk about guns and missiles. Who's got the money? And I actually think that was important, right? It is often, these conflicts that we've been describing are often economic at their very root, at their very foundation. There's other reasons for conflict, but the place where the first guns always end up, the first conflict is always economic. So that means we all have to do the hard work that comes with making sure that we, and I guess you asked this as a global matter, but as in America, we've got to produce as much energy as we can for the world. We have enormous capacity to do that. By the way, we should do it alongside our friends in Canada and here in the Middle East. to deliver Western energy on that model. There's enormous opportunity in the innovation space. There's people far smarter than me on AI. I spent a lot of time thinking about quantum and cryptography when I was the CI director.
I was going to ask you that. Did you then see it as a risk?
No, we saw
perhaps
it,
now as an opportunity?
We saw it as both, actually, inside, right? So when you're trying to figure out, remember, I become the CI director, Becky, and within a month, my team briefs me on the single largest loss of CIA secrets in the history of the agency. Became Vault 7. The WikiLeaks theft had taken place in March of 2016. We didn't learn about it at the CIA till March of 17.
So 6 weeks into the job.
6 weeks into the job, yeah. Welcome to the agency.
Yeah,
by the way, I learned a few things after that 6 weeks too. Like, why didn't you tell me that? Anyway, but this risk, this cyber risk, we talk about these kinetic risks, the capacity for the Chinese Communist Party to speak directly to your children and grandchildren without you being able to disintermediate that information is historic. We've never lived in a world, right? In the United States today, no foreign enterprise can own a TV station. Have to be American-owned, control the broadcast stations and the local affiliates. Yet today we let the Chinese Communist Party control the primary news source for many of our grandchildren.
Which is TikTok, of course. What do you make
No, it's not just TikTok. It's TikTok, but TikTok's an algorithm. Right. It is the Chinese Communist Party's information flow through there that we ought to disaggregate.
Just out of interest, what do you know about that TikTok deal, and what do you make of it?
Yeah, so the goal was, the first Trump administration, I think still, to take it back and make it, that the information that flows into the United States across that network will be controlled by Americans, or by Westerners. It could be European investors as well. I think that's a great outcome. I don't know where the deal stands today. And of course, Congress has passed a law as well. My view is always we should comply with laws. I hope that we'll do that. But everybody would be happy if we could get to that place. I don't think Xi Jinping will let that happen because it's too powerful a tool to undermine the West. And so I'll be surprised if we achieve that. And then I don't know. I don't know if we shut it down or what that actually looks like.
You say you like to follow the rules. There you differ somewhat from your former boss.
Oh, I don't know. Well, leave that to others to judge. Yes, I tend to I think laws matter. Yes.
Can I just ask you a couple of more personal questions, really? You, at the beginning of this year, lost your security detail. We've seen John Bolton, a former administration exec, indicted. I haven't heard you, and I'm not asking you to be negative about the US president. You clearly, fundamentally agree with him on many, many issues. But do you fear for your own safety and for what appears to be a sort of policy of revenge and retribution from Donald Trump?
Those are two different questions, I think. I don't fear. I try to be as smart as I can. We've got security here, taking good care of all of us today. I have my own private security detail that I pay for. As a U.S. policy matter, it seems to me that U.S. government officials who take actions under color of law and who are then threatened ought to be protected by the U.S. taxpayer, by the U.S. government. That's not just me. That would be General McKinsey, who was the CENTCOM commander at the time. It's a fellow who worked for me at the State Department. There are still 3 or 4 of us that ITOL is trying to make vanish. And I think, by the way, I would say that for Secretary Blinken or Jake Sullivan or whomever, if there are credible threats against them that result from their actions in government, the United States government has a responsibility to provide as much protection as it can. And they're not doing that for us today, and I think that's a policy mistake.
And John Bolton was.
By the way, my wife would say it a little bit differently. And my son had security for extended period of time. The Iranians were threatening him, which, by the way, my wife worries about me, but she's like, I can replace you, man. that's my boy.
That's rough.
Exactly.
That is rough.
Yeah.
I mean, John Bolton.
You have to laugh, right?
No.
And then you asked the second question about sort of this theory of revenge and everything.
I just, do you believe that these charges against him are politically motivated, and does that worry you?
So we should never prosecute anybody politically. Having said that, I am publicly on record saying that John Bolton released national security information, classified information, in his book during the first Trump administration. I believe factually that is true. That's a crime in the United States of America. The Biden administration began to investigate it. I don't know where they were in their investigation at the time. And so you have this conundrum where now it, you know, and by the way, I read the indictment. If that indictment is true, I have no idea if it's true. If that indictment is true, it's worse than I knew what he actually did. We had foreign intelligence, according to the indictment, we had a foreign intelligence service identify that he was sending this very same information to friends and family. That is not how a U.S. government official should behave. It is illegal. That's a bad idea. And so those of us who commit illegal acts, seems appropriate to prosecute them to me.
Still doesn't answer the question
but
as to whether
it does,
you think it's politically motivated, and whether that worries you, you know.
Yeah, no, political prosecutions always worry me. When a prosecution is engaged in as a result of someone who's engaged in criminal behavior is not only appropriate, it is necessary. Right? I mean, you're struggling to hold two thoughts in your head at the same time. I do every so often as well. But it appears to me to be fundamentally true that Mr. Bolton broke the law. There you go.
I'm
period, full stop.
perfectly happy to take the answer, and I'm glad that's I'm glad that you feel as strongly as you do about it.
By the way, some jury is going to get to decide if I'm right or not.
Sure.
And not me. Yeah.
President Trump's loyalty, and this brings me to my last question, really, and it was important to address, you know, what we've just been discussing, because, you know, President Trump's loyalty, it seems, can be fragile.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
So, which begs the question, and I know, you know, speaking to people around the world, it's a question that many in leadership and government are asking, is can allies still rely on American leadership?
Yeah, that's an easy question. That's an easy question. The answer is, of course, yes. I mean, what else would you like me to say? Yes, you can count on America to do a number of things, which importantly means American leadership will continue to be there. We will work alongside our friends and partners, and we will annoy the hell out of you. You can count on all of that.
So we're stuck with you.
Yeah, you're stuck with us, for good and for bad. And that doesn't matter who the president is. I remember people being furious at Barack Obama. I can remember our allies not being happy with Ronald Reagan. It's just the nature of being this important player on the global stage that you're going to have rough points. If you ask what's the through line, and I actually saw an interview that just flowed across my information stream that General Stoltenberg did, the former Secretary General of NATO. Like, he and I consider him a close friend.
Would he ever have called the president daddy?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, look, it's very complicated when you're the head of NATO and 24 of your countries aren't providing any support for you, and you're dependent on the United States, right? And that aren't doing what he knew, right? As a European himself, he knew that they had underinvested in the NATO enterprise, and so he was trying to balance that. And he managed
I interrupted.
No, he managed it incredibly effectively. And so I use that as an exemplar of. So it's annoying when that happens. But what has President Trump demonstrated time and time again? When it matters, we'll be there. And so I get asked, like, I get asked all the time, like, does President Trump believe in Article 5? The answer is, well, of course he does. And of course, when things matter most, the United States will be there. I'm very confident. We will, by the way, we will do it for all the right reasons and also out of our self-interest. And that's a right reason, too.
And with that, we're going to leave it there because time's up. Congratulations on the new
Thank you very much.
Grandchild in the family.
Highlight of the last year, for sure.
Highlight of the last year. A big round of applause.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.